juliba lutua lutua oh na makam lutua unu wek lueng lutua unu wek lueng oh na makam ngai na makam boy oh na makam boy ngai na makam boy unu para kileba juliba
Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning. Can anybody hear me? Yes, so this is one of the interpreters. We will have to sort out all the interpreters thing before the work can go on. One interpreter is still not assigned and he has to move to the main room in order to be assigned for everything to run smoothly. So please let's look into it quickly before we continue. Thank you.
Okay, we'll get a result shortly.
Songi bandikoe likambo na motema ngai na motema unu para kileba chililo lutua ona makambo
Monongeletten, Tewaten, Nasimakot Idioten, Onina Wanika, Mon Puli-moi Mutande Noten, Ukunabe, Bebena Waten, Dutunyimba Mulematen, Ebukimba Maboden, Elena Oye, Mona Wabongo Jitown. Amunjami inyandolo, weapon ba meseten, mona menwe kata midongoten, bukato be no waten. Now mende kata wiyaten, na sivinje na imente no vola ruku, unyolangoye. Il bosambo wepombo wana dalowina. Il kne walote kne kimila boku mama.
today's virtual event. We are sorry for the technical glitches we experienced at the start. So, my name is Jonah Ibidi, the Communications and Digital Platform Officer for WADEMOS. And I'll be doing the moderation with my colleague, Marie-Josiane Inga, who is the Francophone coordinator for the network. Before we get into the details of today's program, here are a few ground rules to guide the interaction and ensure we have a smooth webinar. First of all, there are English, French, and Portuguese translations available. Please refer to the button at the bottom of your screen. There is a tab with a globe-like image. Please click on it to choose the language of your choice. The event is planned to take no more than 2 hours, so we appreciate it if all comments, questions, inputs are brief. We should also be discreet with our choice of words and deliberate. Kindly mute your microphone if you are not speaking. The event will also be recorded and made available to you together with a full report for your reference. If you have any concerns, we are happy to assist. Kindly send us a message in the message section on Zoom and we'll attend to you. Now my colleague will introduce the panelists for today's session. Thank you. For today's event, we have 4 panelists to help us with the discussion. I've been joined by Dr. Christopher Komunyo, who is a Senior Associate and Regional Director for Central and West Africa for the National Democracy Institute, NDI. We have also been joined by Mr. Ibrahim Farouk. He's a Programs Manager at Yaga Africa. And we have the privilege of being joined by Mr. Somna Sambu, who is the Director of News at Arise TV Nigeria. And we were supposed to be joined by Madam Idayat Hassan, the Executive Director of CDD West Africa, but in her place, the Programs and Grants Manager for CDD West Africa, Mr. Damien, would speak in her absence. Thank you very much. I hand over to the acting. I hand over to Dr. Kojo Asante, who will need to give us the introductory remarks and welcome us all to today's event. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Jonah, for the introduction. Dr. Chris Fromonyo, Senior Associate Regional Director for Central and West Africa at NDI. The representative of Madam Idayat Hassan, Executive Director for CDD West Africa. Mr. Ibrahim Farouk, Programs Manager for Yaga. Mr. Samna Sambo, Director of News at Arise TV Nigeria. Steering committee members who are online, network members, representatives from sister CSOs and pro-democracy institutions, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm very delighted to welcome all of you to this event for the dissemination of the West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network report on the 2023 Nigerian elections. Your presence here, despite your busy schedules, attests to the importance that you are called to the strengthening of democracy in the ECOWAS sub-region and beyond. The WADEMOS is a non-partisan, independent civil society-led transnational democracy solidarity network. WADEMOS network consists of over 35 civil society prominent groups located in all 15 countries in West Africa. We seek to mobilize and to coordinate and leverage the collective power of civil society and other pro-democracy actors, resources and opportunities within the West Africa region to advance and to defend and to reinvigorate democracy and promote democratic norms and reforms in the sub-region. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on September 14, 2022, our member CSOs met in Accra, Ghana for the first ever network members meeting. Among others, the network, after thorough deliberations, highlighted 5 areas it will prioritize moving forward. The priority areas include elections in West Africa, countries in transition, shrinking civic spaces, protection of human rights defenders and frontline democratic defenders, and lastly, but not the least, terrorism and insecurity in the sub-region. The report we are about to disseminate embodies our solidarity in real action in an election priority area. Nigeria held its national elections on February 25th, 2023. The election was the first of 3 key national elections in the ECOWAS sub-region, the other 2 being Liberia and Sierra Leone, which the WADEMOS network will closely monitor. The Nigeria election was the 6th consecutive presidential election held in the country since its return to multi-party democracy, one that we must all acknowledge and celebrate. In a solidarity mission to Nigeria from January 24 to 27, the network engaged key stakeholders in the country, including the Independent National Electoral Commission, the National Peace Committee of Nigeria, the National Human Rights Committee of Nigeria, the Interparty Advisory Committee, the media, CSOs, and ECOWAS. We released a statement detailing our findings and recommendations. The statement can be found on our website. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, the network deployed a technical team to observe the February 25th national election and learn lessons from the Nigerian electoral processes. The outcomes of the elections in Nigeria has implications for the sub-region, both politically and economically, and it is therefore not surprising that several institutions trooped to the country to observe the elections. We are grateful to our Nigerian partners, members of WADEMOS, CDD West Africa, Yaga Africa, the Transition Monitoring Group, and the Women in Law and Politics for supporting and facilitating our work and involvement in the whole electoral process. And I have to mention also WADEP, the Nigeria office. The WADEMOS network, based on its pre- and post-election observations, has put together this webinar to present its findings, observations, lessons, and recommendations for future elections in West Africa, especially as we hope to improve the electoral outcomes in Sierra Leone and Liberia. We are open to learning and hearing from you as well as in the course of the program. So please feel free to share your views, opinions, and perspectives on the 2023 Nigerian elections, and the details of the report we will be sharing with you. The full report will be shared with you by the end of the week. Once again, I'm really excited to have you have honored us with your presence, and I look forward to a very insightful discussion and fruitful collaboration as we strive to counter the threats to democracy in our sub-region. Thank you very much for your attention. Over to you, Jonah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asante, for the introductory remarks. We move straight into the highlight for today's event, which is the presentation of the WADEMOS Network report on the 2023 Nigeria elections. And to do this, Paul Osei will be sharing details of the report with us. Paul Osei is the acting network coordinator for the WADEMOS network.
All right, thank you very much, Jonah. And thank you to Dr. Asante. And good afternoon, good evening to colleagues online. I'm presenting this report on behalf of the WADEMOS network. My colleague Jonah will project it. Okay, thank you, colleagues. As I said, this presentation is being done on behalf of the network members. Also participating in the presentation are the PMU members as well. So as Dr. Asante mentioned earlier, election is one of the critical pillars for the West Africa Democratic Solidarity Network. The network has 5 main strategic priorities. And for this year, as part of our election interventions, we focused on 3 major elections. 3 major elections in the region.
Today's virtual event. We are sorry for the technical issues we experienced.
Our calendar showed that there will be 3 major elections.
My name is
Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. So Nigeria was supposed to take place in February, Liberia
who is the francophone
October, and Sierra Leone is the most immediate.
Before we get into the details of today's program,
our election interventions focused around 2 major initiatives: pre-solidarity and assessment mission, and election observation and learning mission. As part of this, we complemented our election initiatives with also the use of social media campaigns and conversations to promote interest and attention on the election within the sub-region.
Globe like image. Please click on it to choose the language of your choice. The event is planned to take no more than 2 hours.
So today I'm presenting the highlights of the report that WADEMOS publishing in the course of the week.
We should also be
the report is structured with 5 parts. These are the introduction, the context within which the election was conducted, the pre-election mission,
will also be
the election observation and learning mission, and then provides conclusions and recommendations.
If you have any concerns, we are happy to assist.
A first snapshot of the objectives for the 2023 Nigeria election activity. One was to extend solidarity and support the WADEMOS members in Nigeria on their planned activities for the presidential and legislative election. Promote learning and knowledge is
the director of
election among the members of WADEMOS.
Nigeria.
This one, our focus was much more with countries preparing for election,
the executive director of
that is Sierra Leone and Liberia.
The programs
promote the integrity and credibility of election in West Africa. This is also against the background of the current context of democratic backsliding, where the quality of elections are deteriorating over time. And above all, to regionalize our elections in the sub-region, so that elections will not be seen as an affair in one country, but something that the sub-region citizens, stakeholders
Dr.
really pay a lot of attention and interest to give us that keep an eye on how we monitor the outcomes and activities regarding the election.
Thank you.
In our approach, we review the electoral laws and regulations. So we look at the new act that was passed. We did a lot
thank you very
of
much,
media monitoring and coverage
for the introduction.
to be able to pick highlights.
Dr. Chris Romonyo, Senior Associate Regional Director for Central and West Africa at NDI, the representative of Badami Dayat Hassan, Executive Director for CD West Africa, Mr. Ibrahim Farouk, Progress Manager for IAGA, Mr. Samna Sambo, Director of News at Arise TV, Nigeria, steering committee members who are online, network members, representatives from sister CSOs, pro-democratic institutions, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm very delighted to welcome all of you to this event for the dissemination of the West Africa Democratic Solidarity Network report on the 2023 Nigerian elections. Your presence here, despite your busy schedules, attests to the importance that you are called to the strengthening of democracy in the ECOWAS sub-region and beyond. The WADEMOS is a non-partisan, independent civil society-led transnational democratic solidarity network. WADEMOS network consists of over 35 civil society prominent groups located in all 15 countries in West Africa. We seek to mobilize and to coordinate and leverage the collective power of civil society and other pro-democracy actors, resources and opportunities within the West Africa region, key stakeholders in the country, including the Independent National Electoral Commission, the National Peace Committee of Nigeria, the National Human Rights Committee of Nigeria, the Interparty Advisory Committee, the media, CSOs, and ECOWAS. We released a statement detailing our findings and recommendations. The statement can be found on our website. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, the network deployed a technical team to observe the February 25th national election and learn lessons from the Nigerian electoral processes, collaboration as we strive
during the election day observation
democracy in the sub-region. Thank you very much.
We deployed our members. We were just 5, but we were able to.
Over to you,
Thank you very much.
That were all constituted or assembled at a transport hotel. So we were mostly at CDD West Africa Elections Analysis Center. That was the host for the delegation members. And we also participated in activities of the Nigerian IAGA's Africa Working Vote Initiative Temporal Tabulation, as well as the ERA, the Election Results Analysis Dashboard. Also, we monitored activities and development and transition monitoring group situation room, the women's situation room, in foundation election situation monitoring situation would be sharing and also observe the INEC National Coalition Network Coordinator for the what did we pick from the context in terms of developments around the election? All right, thank you very much. We noticed that the Nigerian elections had a good afternoon, evening, and that was all night. It says that Nigerians presenting this report on behalf of really the WADEMOS network. So we identified 145 candidates, 18 political parties, 109 senatorial districts, 360 federal constituencies, 993 state constituencies, and 28 governorship positions. I think the election did not cover all the 36 states in terms of governments. The election focused on 28. Economic challenges that we observed or we profiled during the election included the issue of subsidies. Youth unemployment was a topical issue. Poor scarcity as well, and the Naira recirculation or the redesign program that was implemented by the federal government of Nigeria. Also, under insecurity, we noticed that it was evident in all the six geographical zones. We also noticed the killing of Labour Party candidates in Enugu State. And also, the election also took place during attacks on INEC facilities, or INEC experienced a number of attacks on these facilities. And this was documented by ACLE. It's a program or project championed by CDD West Africa. Almost about 51 attacks were recorded on INEC facilities in Nigeria. There was also the signing of peace accord, the first and the second signing. We witnessed the second signing in Abuja. Also within the context, there was a lot of anxiety among Nigerians on the functionality of the BVAS and IREF. A lot of people were a bit apprehensive whether the IREF and the BVAS will function smoothly on the election day. This was recorded when we did the pre-election assessment mission, and most of the stakeholders that we engaged, especially civil society, raised this level of apprehension. Then we also noticed the new electoral law and INEC guidelines, which had a lot of innovations surrounding the election. And in addition to the contest, there was also a lot of excitement and enthusiasm around the election. We noticed that the factors driving this enthusiasm and excitement included the considerable huge number of young voters registered and who were showing interest in the elections, the introduction of the BVAS to enhance integrity of the election also created a lot of excitement. Then the third pause. Nigeria has largely been a duopoly, even that the APC is still struggling to ground its locus as a major party in Nigeria. So the emergence of a third force created a lot of attention and enthusiasm for the election. I've also mentioned the BVAS. In addition to the BVAS, go to the IREF, which was also expected to be the game changer for election to bring a lot of transparency in results transmission and collation. We also noticed the involvement of creatives in the election. Then the election was also a test for the growing multi-party democracy in Nigeria, and as well as the APC dominance in Nigerian politics. The 2023 election was the sixth consecutive election since Nigerians returned to democracy in 1999. And also Nigeria's own geopolitical and economic position in West Africa created a lot of interest, especially among West African citizens. Key observations, learning and experiences from the Nigeria election. The first one is our observation on the role of civil society and media. And we want to recognize the significant role played by civil society and the media in all the election phase, the pre-election, the election day, and the post-election environment. The media implemented a lot of initiatives that helped mobilize citizens during voter registration. The same for civil society, their activities promoted inclusion and participation during the election. We recognize the CDD fact-checking initiative and election analysis center, the YAGA Africa Parallel Voter Tabulation, and the ERA during election, and the Election Manipulation Risk Report Index. These were all critical additions and brought a lot of value to the election. The Women's Situation Group efforts to promote inclusion, especially for our women who are mostly marginalized and are vulnerable when it comes to elections and representation. Green Foundation's initiative on election peace and security is also commendable, among many other initiatives that I cannot mention. The same for the media. They did a lot of public education and sensitization and raised a lot of awareness on the new electoral law and INEC guidelines. On INEC, our observation from the election was that the Independent National Election Commission Fund is a very good addition to election administration in the sub-region. And it's something that we will recommend as a model for EMBs in West Africa. That notwithstanding, we also noticed concerns regarding the appointment of resident electoral commissions at the state level. We observed concerns around political interference in the appointment, which can compromise the independence of INEC. And this is something that even in Ghana, quite recently, we've had a similar experience where the president has appointed 3 members who replace members of the EC, Electoral Commission, who have retired. That with Racing Society has raised concerns about the political allegiance of 1 or 2 members and the need for the president to withdraw or for those members to step down from the appointment. And we think that appointments to resident electoral commission require some kind of standardization or integrity to be able to safeguard and protect the sanctity of EMs in the region. Then the issues, the challenges with logistical deployment. A lot of civil society have already echoed some of these challenges. The arrival of INEC officials at the polling station and arrival of the sensitive materials as well. This contributed to some of the delays that we had in opening of polls at the polling units, and also indirectly also might have contributed to the low voter turnout that was experienced. Then the INEC results transmission challenges that we have a lot of civil society organizations have already emphasized, particularly the failure of IREN to upload the results from the polling units. For us, this is a critical observation because it had a lot of implications. The first was that citizens, political parties, and other stakeholders were really cut out from the collation process. Because if you look at even the Yaga setup, they had constituted what they call the election results analysis dashboard. And the absence of the upload or the failure of the upload really made this process dysfunctional. And we also know a lot of citizens groups have gathered and media were expecting to use the IREF to do the collations. And this didn't happen. So the collation process was really done largely at the blind side of citizens. Citizens could not participate and follow the process, and the process wasn't transparent. Then in resolving discrepancies during results collation, the INEC law, the electoral law, requires that if there are challenges or there are petitions during collation at the ward level, the INEC officials are supposed to use the electronic uploaded polling unit results as the benchmark for resolving these discrepancies. Unfortunately, the results from the polling units were not uploaded. So it's a dilemma how these challenges concerning discrepancies in results were resolved at the ward level or at the local government area level. Then on voter turnout, we also observed from the Situation Room reports that out of the 87.2 million voters who collected their PVCs, 24.9 million voted on election day. And barely 9 million people voted for President for President-elect Bola Tinubu, who will now govern over 200 million Nigerians. In all 36 states, less than half of the eligible population turn out to vote, and no state had a turnout above 40%. I mean, a lot of concerns and explanations have been adduced for the poor voter turnout. People have ascribed the insecurity, the late arrival of materials, the voter suppression, and other socioeconomic factors such as the Naira redesign policy and the poor scarcity as reasons for the low voter turnout. But it still doesn't really suffice for the outcome of the elections. And the voter turnout needs to be investigated because it somehow affects the legitimacy of the election. And it's something that WADEMOS wants to really flag and raise it for the attention of INEC and all other stakeholders involved in the election. On election security, we also monitored and recorded the following, or made the following observation. Situation rooms and media reported incidents of intimidation, attacks, and harassment of voters. Again, there were equally reports from the situation rooms of attacks, going around destroying election materials and dispersing voters in Kogi and River States. The Clean Foundation observes that the communication channels for reporting incidents to security agencies during the 2023 general elections were not quite effective as envisaged. There were concerns about some security personnel being compromised during the election. And the Almighty Peace Accord, we observed or we monitored that there were a lot of violations of the Peace Accord in terms of the commitment that political parties have really signed on to. Then on gender, our monitoring of the situation rooms and the media reports showed that, and also from the results of INEC, that the House of Representatives and Deputy Governors of the 92 female candidates that contested for seats in Nigerian Senate, only 3 won, a considerable decline from 2019, where women occupied 8 of the 109 seats in Nigerian Senate. So with the exception of the Senate, the House of Representatives and the Deputy Governors experienced some kind of an increase in the number of representation by women. But we witnessed a decline at the Senate level for women who contested to enter the Senate. So it declined from 3 to 8, and this is something that needs to be pointed out boldly. In terms of recommendations, this recommendation seeks to also anchor some of the previous proposals and suggestions that the situation rooms have put across. We add our voice to commend the introduction of the BVAS and IREF. However, the commission, that is INEC, needs to initiate internal investigations to review the performance of IREF and submit its findings to the public. We believe that this review process will restore confidence in INEC, especially when it's conducted in a bipartisan, multi-stakeholder approach. Again, some polling stations also open very late, including arrival of materials. It's important for INEC to investigate this outcome and ensure that future elections are improved in terms of opening of polls and arrival of material. Because the late opening of polls are all forms of voter suppression. On the same INEC, we recognize the improvements in the upload of results during the gubernatorial elections. And the introduction of technology is a value addition to elections in the region. But we believe that, or we make a proposal that INEC should not end at the polling units, at the coalition levels, at the ward level, at the local government areas, and at the state level. Results from these places should also be uploaded to enhance transparency in the process. INEC should also investigate the low voter turnout that characterized the elections in Nigeria, because it has a tendency to undermine the legitimacy of the election. And also, especially with the state level elections, we observe a lot of chaos or inconsistencies with regards to addressing complaints and challenges by political party agents. It will be very helpful going into future elections for INEC to streamline these processes in terms of how parties are required to file complaints and challenges, and the procedures for INEC to resolve these challenges at the local government area or ward level or at the state coalition center. Then on election security, we noticed that election is becoming an existential threat in terms of security. The Ghana election that was held in 2020 witnessed reported violence, and some people died at few coalition centers. It's important as a region we begin to review election security management, and we make a case that ECOWAS can support member countries to enhance election security within the countries in West Africa. The peace accord is a very good model, but it's flagrantly abused and violated. It's important to review its implementation over time and improve sanctions or compliance around it. Post-election dispute in courts. It appears elections in the sub-region are turning up in courts. In 2020, the election in Ghana ended up in court. Nigeria is also in court. We have to begin reviewing the role of the courts in resolving election disputes in the sub-region. A lot of people tend to see the process as very adversarial and also too legalistic, without opening up the election process for verification. There are concerns that in some countries, there are opportunities for political parties to make complaints to either the EMB or an appellate structure for all such complaints to be addressed before the election is certified or validated and approved. I think some of these mechanisms may need to be considered to minimize the involvement of the courts in determining the outcome of elections in the region. It will also make it much more reconciliatory than the current adversarial nature that we find in courts, and also put the EMBs at the middle or at the focus for responding to complaints and grievances. Then I think with regards to inclusion, we still have a long way to go, with the exception of the Senate, the House of Representatives, and the state level didn't see much improvement with women being elected into these positions. It calls for more action or support for affirmative action laws in the region, including Nigeria. Sierra Leone recently passed the Gender Equality and Women Empowerment Act to advance women's rights in Sierra Leone. I think these are good models that WADEMOS wants to align and make and recommend this proposal. In conclusion, We want to emphasize the point that election will come and go, but it's important we ensure that we don't encounter excesses that can derail the already vicarious or the already challenging environment we find ourselves. Currently, the region is experiencing a lot of instability. WADEMOS wants to appeal to all election stakeholders, especially those involved in the election petition, to avoid inflammatory language that could incite the youth to cause violence. They must respect and rely on the existing legal framework for resolving their grievances, and they should avoid acts that could worsen insecurity and instability in the region. The election also shows high dissatisfaction with democracy, considering the turnout, using the turnout as the benchmark, the lowest in the sub-region. And the results also show complete disapproval of establishment candidates. There is a need for the new government to improve citizens' agency and enhance state-society relations to restore and secure democracy in the region. Security of polls also remains an essential threat to the region. There is a need for cross-border cooperation, and even the ECOWAS bylaws, protocols, sorry. If there are opportunities, ECOWAS protocols will be enhanced to support election security in the region. And finally, we want to commend all stakeholders for their role in the elections, especially our network members in Nigeria who boosted the team and facilitated our engagements with all the stakeholders we met at the pre-election and the election day observation mission. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much, Paul Osei, for that presentation. Paul Osei is the acting WADEMOS network coordinator, and he just gave us this insightful presentation. Now we'll move on to hearing from our panelists. We have 20 minutes to do this session, and so I'm going to have to moderate the time between. So I start with Dr. Chris Fomunyo of the National Democratic Institute. They were also in Nigeria to observe the elections. So you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Jonah, for those very kind words. Thanks to Dr. Kojo for his very warm introductory remarks that help us set the stage. And congratulations, really, for the hard work to all the members of WADEMOS for your hard work and your commitment and your contribution to the process of advocating for credible and meaningful elections and electoral integrity across the sub-region. Obviously, Nigeria and Nigerian elections attracted a lot of interest and attention, and we have delegations out there. And as you just mentioned, Jonah, NDI fielded a joint international observer mission with the International Republican Institute, our counterpart organization, and we were able to observe various aspects of the process. But I wanted to just pick on two things that really stand out for me as the niche that WADEMOS brings to election observation, and that you mentioned in your report. The first one is the solidarity and support that you sought to bring to Nigerian organizations. And the second one is promoting learning and knowledge sharing. And I think these are really unique niches for WADEMOS. And even though, as we are aware, there were challenges, significant challenges with the Nigerian elections, especially those of February 25, which we observed. and a sense in some milieus that those elections didn't give African elections the boost that we had all been hoping for. Organizations and coalitions such as WADEMOS can really help spread the word and also share best practices and what worked well in those elections. For me, it's the work that was done by Nigerian civil society, which I think continues to be the bedrock of democracy in Nigeria, or democratic governance in Nigeria. And it was also the participation of the youth, Nigerian youth, who really got themselves onto the voter rolls and played very meaningful roles in terms of voter and civic education, election observation, and also participation as voters and polling officers. My hope going forward is that there could be a follow-up on the part of WADEMOS to see which of the recommendations are implemented, but that also WADEMOS continues to assert its presence in terms of conducting its own reviews in terms of identifying what the impact of the conduct of the Nigerian elections is across the sub-region of West Africa, and how that is impacting preparations for elections in Sierra Leone in June, and then in Liberia in October, as well as in Senegal come February 2024. So I think WADEMOS is arriving this space observation at an opportune moment, and that my hope is that you would continue to put emphasis on the two areas that are really unique and that only a structure like yours can undertake, which is to show solidarity for the in-country organizations that may be coming under the kinds of pressures that you may not be experiencing, and also to help promote learning amongst the next generation of civic leaders, of leaders of election monitoring organizations, and sharing knowledge across the sub-region so that we can all collectively continue to work and advocate for greater electoral integrity in our respective countries. So thank you for this opportunity, and I would look forward to learning from the discussions that would ensure. Congratulations on a job well done. Over to you, Jonah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Komino, for that brief remarks. I will now move on to Ibrahim Farouk of Yaga Africa for his remarks.
Thank you so much, Jonah. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
And let me just say thank you to the entire WADEMOS network. Thank you to Dr. Kojo for this invitation to come and speak. And very quickly, just share some remarks about the Nigerian elections. One of the things for me was that we're looking at how we can strengthen unity among civil society and pro-democracy activists for peaceful and credible elections in West Africa. And I think that is one of the things that WADEMOS has done. In the pre-election environment for us, in Nigeria especially, we've seen where civil society organizations and pro-democracy networks were involved in peaceful and credible elections, whether this was around voter education, whether this was around creating awareness, whether this was around dialogues around peace. And I think that the report, which is going to be launched very soon, speaks about many of these issues. In the pre-election environment, we saw that civil society organizations, young people, exhibited a lot of interest and excitement about the 2023 general elections. For instance, we saw young people who were mobilizing their peers to register, to collect their permanent voters' cards, and to come out and vote. Sadly, this did not translate into high levels of voter turnout, especially for young people. But we also saw the organizations like the National Peace committee, for instance, ensuring that there was signing of the peace accord. So across board, within the country, we were able to see civil society and pro-democracy activists playing their role in ensuring that we would have a credible and peaceful election. But going beyond that, to see international solidarity, and first of all, from our immediate community, from within the West African sub-region, and having the West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, WADEMOS, which sent a pre-assessment mission that met with civil society and WADEMOS network members, met with various stakeholders in the electoral process. And I think, like Dr. Chris mentioned, Nigeria is such an important country, not just for West Africa, but for the entire continent and for the world. And we kind of set the tone for what elections would be in other countries. One of my key takeaways as I start to wrap up on this intervention is that as we look forward to elections in Sierra Leone, as we look forward to elections in Liberia, and other elections across the continent, is to say what are those recommendations we can take from the Nigerian election, either around the use of technology or ensuring that election management bodies build trust between the EMBs and citizens in such a way that would ensure citizens come out to vote, that the entire election process is credible and transparent, such that citizens believe that what is announced at the end of the day is a true reflection of the will of the people. It's been the Nigerian elections are truly an experience, and we've been learning so much and we'll continue to learn so much from it. But beyond just those learnings, is how can we export some of these learnings, some of these interventions as we go to Sierra Leone and as we go to Liberia and as we go across the sub-region and across the continent, and ensuring that we have credible and peaceful elections in Africa. Thank you.
Much, Ibrahim Farouk, for your presentation. Is Mr. Damien here of CDD West Africa?
Yes, good evening, everybody, and thank you, WADEMOS, for organizing this event. We at CDD, we worked with WADEMOS and other civil society organizations throughout the elections, through the support to WADEMOS during the pre-assessments and the actual election monitoring. CDD has released its reports, its findings of the elections. We are still working to come up with the final election report. Talking about some of the things we saw from the process, talking about fake news, the role that fake news played, the role that the media played, also reading your reports. In some of the comments I made is that I didn't see clearly some of the important roles that the media played. CDD as an organization, we worked with a lot of media organizations in creating awareness in critical areas. One of it is in the area of how winners emerge. We wanted Nigerians to understand what it takes for a leader, what it takes for a winner to emerge in a process, because we know the negative impact of that in 2011. And we did a lot of work.
Sorry to interrupt. Respectfully, can you please switch on your camera? It's off at the moment.
Can you see me now? Can you see me?
Not yet.
Not yet. Wow. Is it on now?
No.
Is it on?
No, but you can proceed whilst we try to fix.
Okay, so CDD worked with other organizations. I was talking about the work we did with the media in terms of creating awareness of on voter education in areas of national cohesion that has to do with peaceful voter education messaging. We did those things, and also a lot of work we did in terms of countering misinformation and disinformation that has to do with elections, with our war room that fact-checked a lot of misinformation and disinformation on the elections, and those reports that we churned out. We also worked with other civil society organizations. We mobilized over 4,000 election observers in the field that brought together a lot of the information on the elections, how they went in the field across the 36 states and the 774 local governments across the country. Yes, you can say that this is not the best of the elections that or whatever Nigerians expected, but there are a lot of lessons to learn from the elections. Technology played important and critical role. We know what we used to have in the past, but I think we can improve on that. The beavers is something that when we improve on it, it will be able to bring the credibility in the electoral process and all the rest. So I think, and also things to learn, there are a lot of organizations that have come to us to ask a lot of lessons, to learn a lot of lessons for Sierra Leone and Liberia, the other elections that are coming across Africa and West Africa. I think the media has a very important role to play. The civil society did a lot of work. We had the civil society situation room. We had a situation room in different thematic areas of situation rooms where people monitored the election and gave a lot of insight and report on how the election worked. And I think this is the role that WADEMOS as a network is bringing, to bring us together, to learn, to share lessons from Nigeria that can improve the elections in Sierra Leone, that can improve the elections in Liberia, and also that can improve future elections in Nigeria, as we are learning today, as we are sharing lessons. And we say that this is a very welcome development. We will continue to work to support the election management body, to support other civil society organizations, to also ensure that we air our views on how the elections went and see how the government, and some of those suggestions and these things can be taken to improve electoral process in not just Nigeria, but across West Africa. So I will leave it for here now. And my colleague here, Folabi, can come in. He's also a panelist to add some of the things that I've said. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for the insights you have provided into the work of CDB West Africa. Mr. Folabi, if you are ready, you can switch on your video now and then proceed with your presentation. Mr. Folabi. Whilst we wait for Mr. Folabi to give us his presentation, we would move on to the third session of today's event, which is the question and answer segment. You are free to raise up your hands, and we'll give you the opportunity to ask your questions or make your comments or share your opinion on the Nigeria elections or the reports that has been presented to you. You may also type in the chat box your question or comment, and it will be read out to the rest of the team. So you can raise your hand now. Excuse me. And our okay. So we have Ibasa with his hand up now. So Ibasa, please, you have the floor to speak, to make your comments.
Bonjour.
And so, oui, monsieur, vous pouvez parler maintenant.
Bonjour tout le monde. Bon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Allô, on m'entend? On m'entend bien? Bonjour, bon, merci. D'abord, je me joins.
Good afternoon. And I want to add my voice to everyone to say a big thank you to WADEMOS for this event, and also for the tremendous work that WADEMOS is doing or has done during the elections in Nigeria. I think this is a good call for civil society to partake in such an election in promoting democracy in establishing. And Nigeria, as I always say, is a locomotive in establishing. So I would say big thanks. However, let me come to my question. I wanted to come back to the turnout. I didn't get it quite well. I don't know if it's because the presentation was in English. It was said that those who registered were lesser than those who turned out to vote. I didn't get that quite clear. If the presenter can come back on that to throw a bit more light on it. Now, the second thing has to do with perspective with regards to other countries. And I'm specifically talking about Senegal. There's been some setbacks. I don't know if you are aware, but I want to inform you that there's a coalition that we call FF24 that comprises a civil society organization that want to fight against the third mandate of the current the incumbent president. So we will need the support of other civil society, West African civil society, African civil society, to help us in order not to allow the democracy in Senegal to be compromised. This is what I wanted to put across. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ibasa, for your question. Are there any other questions or we could address? Okay, so we'll address Ibasa's question now. Paul would speak, but after he's done, any of the panelists who also want to add a comment or to the question that has been asked can also do so. And so, Paul, please, you have the.
All right, thank you very much, Jonah. So, Iba, the data shows that 3.4 million voters registered for the election. 87.2 million collected their PVCs, but out of that, 24.9 million actually voted on election day. Okay. Yes, so 93.4 million voters registered for the election. And out of that, 87.2 million voters collected their PVs. These were the people eligible to vote. 87.2 million. And on election day, 24.9 million actually voted, 10 out of votes. So that's the data that we gathered from the situation with and the INEC as well.
Okay. Ibrahim Farouk or any of our Nigerian partners, do you want to add anything more to the question about low voter turnout?
Yes, okay, thank you, Paul. Let me respond to a bit of that. So in the lead up to the 2023 general elections, the Independent National Electoral Commission, which is our election management body, INEC, conducted what is called a continuous voter registration exercise to add voters who had just turned 18 before the elections to the voters register, as well as Nigerians who wanted to transfer from one polling unit to another or change their names. For the 2019 general elections, we had about 84 million registered voters. 84 million registered voters in 2019. About 9 million plus voters were added to the register for 2023, bringing the total number of voters on the register to about 93 million. Now, out of that 93 million, about 87 million had collected their permanent voters cards, according to information from INEC, the Independent National Electoral Commission. So we have 93 million registered voters, about 87 million who have collected their permanent voters cards. However, voters turnout was just about 29%. So I think about close to 24 million who came out to vote. And voters turnout is calculated according to the number of those who have collected their permanent voters cards, not the number that we have on the voters register. So only about 29% of 87 million came out to vote on election day, and by any standards, that's very low turnout for any country, especially a country like Nigeria with such a huge voting population.
Thank you very much for the additional information that you provided. Do we have any more hands up, any more questions following the presentation? Okay. David has answered that one.
Yeah, so before the election, what we learned was that the impediment to voter turnout was usually what do you call it? That's a loss of interest in elections, and we had assumed that this will improve with the INEC regulations and everything that we saw, the new electoral guidelines and all those things. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So the issue now becomes, how do we improve voter turnout going into elections, not just in Nigeria, but across the board in the region? Because here's the situation where we were expecting that electoral violence, for example, will pose an impediment. Unfortunately, it didn't. And we were expecting that INEC, with its guidelines, would actually have, bettered the system this time around. Unfortunately, it appears that with the late opening of polls, which was something that was brought about by INEC's own, inadequacies, the low voter turnout became a prominent impediment to this election. So now that we have the institution that is supposed to prevent these things, rather than the institution that is somehow enabling it, how do we proceed in future? How do we ensure that, say, not just in Nigeria, but Nigeria's case is a very prominent example in the sub-region, because it is seen as, it is seen as the model. So how do we improve going into the future?
Thank you. Okay, before you come in, Ibrahim and others, let me take more questions from our participants. Omar, please ask your question, and then once you are done, Osman Abdul Rahman will have his turn. And so, Omar, please, you have the floor. Yes, go. Okay. Osman Abdul Rahman, please ask your question. You have the floor.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I want to thank WADEMOS for the very wonderful work that has been done in this. And I think I've learned a lot. My interest is in the voters who were told that there are 93 million registered voters. 87 million collected their permanent voter cards. And that tells that there is about some 6 million or so who didn't take their permanent voter card. What was the reason for this? And did that have any impact on the elections? Of course, I mean, the total turnout we're told is about around 29%, 28.6 actually. So could that have contributed to at least somehow the low voter turnout? And yeah, so I'm just interested in that. And is it that some people were disenfranchised by this process? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Umaba, are you ready to speak now? So I have a question here from Al-Hassan Baldi, and he's asking, so he said, I would just like to ask, what are the follow-up mechanisms for the recommendations of the observation report from WADEMOS? And how does WADEMOS intend to collaborate with its members in Nigeria to resolve them? That's a question from Al-Hassan Baldi. And so I'll first go to Paul, and then I'll come to our panelists.
Yes, Alhaji Osman, you are right that about 6 million of people did not collect their PVC. When we went for the pre-election assessment exhibition, so when we went for the pre-election assessment mission, one of our recommendations was to INEC that they should really speed up and enhance the issuance of the PVC cards. When we did the pre-election, we noticed that there were a lot of queues, there were a lot of commotion. Most of the areas or centers for collection were congested. So it caused some kind of disincentive for a lot of Nigerians. It was a bit inconvenient for them. So we're quite impressed when we went back on election day, a few days into the election, and we noticed that over 90% or so were able to have access to their voting cards. And for us, it was quite commendable. With regards to the 6 million, it's very difficult to say at this stage what could be the reason for them not going for the PVC cards. I'm sure some of them may have decided on their own not to participate in the election. In some countries, the voter card also provides other forms of identity for business transactions. And as a result, brings an added value to citizens to go for their voter cards. I think I don't know much about how the Nigerian situation is, but in Ghana, if you have the voter card, you're able to access some commercial facilities. We are now migrating to the Ghana card, which will also, in one way or the other, diminish this kind of added value that the voter cards bring. So I'll defer that a bit to my colleagues in Nigeria, who also speak about the 6 million people who do not turn out to give their PVCs. On the follow-up mechanisms, WADEMOS is a network. One area that we are very much interested in solidarizing with our network members to be able to influence governance at the country level. So the recommendations that we have put forward will be packaged in the form of a memoranda or a policy brief and shared with relevant stakeholders, particularly INEC, already we've had some briefing with INEC when we embarked on the pre-election assessment mission. So there is that camaraderie or that relationship that we can build on in collaboration with our partners in Nigeria to push forward some of the proposals that we have put forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. Dr. Chris Komuno, since you are in Nigeria, would you want to attempt answering some of the questions, please? Or Ibrahim Farouk, you can also answer, or anyone from CDD West Africa, if you want to have a bite at the question, you are free to do so. Okay. So this is okay.
It may be helpful for you to.
Okay, please, what's the question? Because it was breaking. I wasn't hearing him well. Please, can he repeat it? I'll attend to it. Yeah.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's the question, Kwesi?
The question was why about 6 million people did not turn up to collect their PVCs.
Okay, I think the low turnout. If you look at the full context of the whole issue, you know that there was a Naira issue, that is the designing of the Naira, that caused a lot of hardship for people. You can say that people in the cities can go out and find money and do this and transfer to go and collect their PVCs. What about the people in rural areas that don't have access to the Naira to use, to transport, to go to the local government? Yes, these PVCs, the first thing was they were distributed from the ward level and so on. But after that, it was moved to local governments. Now, if your local government is far, I'm not speaking for INEC per se, but I'm trying to give a context to the whole issue so that we understand why we had this. So this could be one of the things that caused it. People were finding it difficult to find the Naira to buy things, the basic things of life. Now, telling them to go and spend money and queue to collect the PVC within that period, I think it was a policy thing that backfired and affected the voter education and no, just the voter collection. That's the PVCs. Yeah.
Does anyone also want to have a bite at this question? Okay. So Omar Ba, you can ask your question now. I keep giving you the mic, but I don't know what the challenge was. Okay, great. So we have been joined by Mr. Samna Sambo. He's the director of news at Arise TV. And earlier on during the presentation by previous speakers, they all highlighted the importance of the media and CSO in the coverage or in the electoral processes in Nigeria. And so we are very glad that he could make time to join. So before we take any more questions, I would like him to give some remarks on the electoral processes as they covered it during the Nigeria election. You are welcome, sir. Hello, Mr. Samna Sambo. Mr. Samna Sambo. Yes, please, you have the floor now. Kindly unmute yourself. Hello? Okay, so while Mr. Sambo prepares to give his remarks, let let me take more questions from the chat box. You can raise your hands or send us a message privately. So this is from Al Hassan Balde again, and he's asking, I think this is a comment. So is it not appropriate to receive observation missions with mini surveys 2 months before the elections in order to collect recommendations from voters in countries where elections are in prospect? And he cited Guinea as an example. I think Guinea has their election coming up, and so his proposal is that ahead of the election, 2 months before the election, as an observation or observer mission, we conduct service 2 months ahead of time. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so I think it's a very, very positive recommendation. But before we go into any election mission, we do a lot of background and context analysis. We are fortunate to have access to Afrobarometer data that also gives us the situational analysis and the context in terms of the socioeconomic and political development with that particular country. So we have some kind of data that shapes our approach and how we go ahead to conduct these kind of missions. But it's something that we will also reflect further whether we can embed it directly as an initiative within our election assessment mission.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. It's Mr. Sambo ready now, please. We will give these remarks.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you very much for joining us. So, because we're actively involved in the Nigeria elections and electoral processes, we want you to give us your observations from that perspective as the director of news for Arise TV.
All right, sorry, I'm in the newsroom and we are handling an emergency, so you may hear some voices here and there. Well, I think the elections have been very controversial. While we, as a country, have tried our best within the situation that was made available to us by the Electoral Commission to see how the elections go smoothly. Nonetheless, we've had some challenges arising from the human factor in the elections, and that's why you've seen some of the political parties heading to the courts, and of course, we also have a result that's coincidentally being released at the moment. This is an election that should have been concluded since the end of March, but we've seen that, being declared inconclusive. Now, some of the supplementary elections were held during the weekend, and just when we thought that that was the end of the inconclusive nature of the elections, we got ourselves into another controversy again. And so that's the challenge that we're having at the moment. So what this means is that our democracy is actually facing some serious challenges when it comes to the issues of organizing elections. We need to further rejig our electoral processes, and then, of course, tweak the electoral law in such a way that, especially the issues of appointing the chairman of the Electoral Commission is removed from the executive and hopefully taken to the judiciary, like it had been proposed by one of our commissions, a panel that was put in place sometime around 2008, which is known as the Justice Uwais panel report, which had recommended that the chairman of the Electoral Commission should not be appointed by the president or the governing party, but it should be by someone who is a product of the National Judicial Commission. 3 names will be submitted and a name will be picked, and then, of course, it will be sent to the Nigerian Senate for screening and confirmation. And so those are some of the challenges we've been facing. And then also we have issues of the trust in the electoral process. The believability of the electoral process was very high prior to the election, But after the elections, we've seen it going very down. And the simple challenge here that we face is the issues of collation. Now, we've tried to digitize the collation process, but unfortunately for us as a country, despite the introduction of technologies here and there, it's been pretty difficult for people to fully remove the human factor. So the human factor still remains a major challenge as to the credibility of the elections. Now, from the perspective of the media, you would have seen that the media has been hit hard by several sanctions, especially by the broadcast regulator, the National Broadcasting Commission, which continues to slam fines on broadcast stations. I mean, we haven't escaped that. And the last one was by a broadcaster, one of the private broadcasters, Channels Television, who had the 5 million naira fine slammed on them. We've continued to ensure that the Nigerian people hold the government and other institutions like INEC to account. But of course, sometimes when we do this, it hits hard at the elites who don't want to give up their powers to, the public. They want to continue to manipulate all processes, and it's a huge challenge because we as journalists owe it to our nation and of course to public to ensure that the right things are done. So it's been a huge challenge for us as a country, and we'll continue to push on because even the judicial processes, we have to ensure that as journalists, the processes are well adhered to, and the processes are not circumvented, and judges do what is right, so as to ensure that our democracy is not, affected negatively. Because everybody is just waiting to see what the outcome of the judicial process will be, right from the political process, which started from the primary elections here and then, of course, coming to the electoral process, and eventually the outcome of the elections, which have been enmeshed in controversies. And then, of course, the judicial process is the last resort in this long leg of the elections, which started sometime around April last year. Coincidentally, it's now a year. So we will continue to count on partners outside the country, our foreign partners, just like WADEMOS, to actually see how they could help to strengthen our democratic practices. You came around into the country and you saw some of the challenges we faced before the elections, and of course, the logistics, some of the polling units not opening on time, and of course, some of the electoral officers being put in the eye of the storm. So we'll continue to seek support from organizations like yours to strengthen our electoral process. And then, of course, for we journalists who cover it, of course, we'll continue to count on you to continue to watch our back and then be the voices that will help to strengthen our professional processes too, because the media has been called to question too as to if we are doing what we ought to do so that the process will be much more credible. So we'll continue to count on your support, and wherever we go wrong too, we'll continue to count on your support. So basically, these are some of the shared experiences, and I await your questions and all of that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samna Sambu, for the remarks. It was very insightful. Dr. Chris Pomuno, I see your hand is up. You have the floor now, please.
Sure. I thank you very much, and Mr. Sambo. Thank you for all the good work. Many of us who came in as observers can bear witness to the very professional reporting that came from Arise TV, and we continue to applaud your efforts. I had raised my hand to respond to the question that was asked earlier about having observers in the country at least 2 months before Election Day, just to reassure the participant who posed the question that that is the methodology that has been accepted and adopted since the Declaration of Principles on election monitoring on international observation that was adopted in 2005 in New York. So for our case, for example, NDI and IRI, we sent 2 pre-election assessment missions to Nigeria in July of 2022 and in December of 2022, November, December 2022. We also had in-country long-term analysts, and some delegations are able to have long-term observers who are permanently stationed in the country months before election day, before the delegation comes itself on election day. And my understanding is that WADEMOS did field a pre-election mission that's well covered in the report that was presented this afternoon. You would see that they sent a pre-election assessment mission to Nigeria months before February, and then returned in February with another delegation. So just to reassure him that that's now standard practice, and every delegation tries to do that. And my hope also is that the partners who have supported WADEMOS work in the past would also make resources available to them, so that now that we're already in April, a pre-election mission can go from WADEMOS to Sierra Leone already in preparation for the June elections, even before they field a delegation to monitor the elections in Sierra Leone in June. And the same would apply to Liberia when we get to the Liberian elections, and Senegal when we get to early 2024. That's the contribution I wanted to make in response to that specific question. Thank you.
Dr. Grace Pomino, that was timely. So if we do not have any more questions from our participants, then we'll be wrapping up by now. But before we do so, we have two hands up. Before we do so, I will go around one more time to our panelists. They were actively involved in the Nigerian elections. Briefly, if they have any more additions or aspects that they will want to highlight from our reports or from their observations and their reports, they are welcome to do so. I start with CDD West Africa this time. Either Damien or your colleague. Yes, Afolabi, fantastic. Afolabi. You are free to do so now. So Afolabi, would you be speaking, please? It's still not on. So Damien.
Okay. So I think the report, once more to say kudos to the team for putting together such a wonderful report. Like I said earlier, we made some comments on it, and it would be nice to highlight the good work of the media. The media did a lot of work, and to also use the opportunity to also say that as a CSO, to warn against gagging the media or whatever, to do anything to make the media to become afraid of doing performing their constitutional duty. So we need to highlight the work of the media better. I'm not saying that you guys didn't highlight it, but it needs to come out more, because they did wonderful work during the election and even after the election. And also highlight some of the things that the CSOs have done across it, and to also begin to think about how these wonderful recommendations can get to the people that are in the best position to implement them and to take action. So once more, I have to say thank you to the WADEMOS team for putting such a wonderful and robust report. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Damien. Let me now take Ibrahim Farouk, and then Mr. Samna Sambo, and then Dr. Chris, and then we'll talk to you. Yes, Mr. Ibrahim Farouk.
Thank you very much, Jonah. And again, to say thank you to the team from WADEMOS and all the network members and all the partners who have stayed as we've had these conversations, and for asking these questions that have provoked a lot of these conversations. My final remarks would be to say that we understand that the 2023 general elections were fraught with many challenges. There were irregularities in the process, of course, and many members of the network who are also on this call witnessed those challenges. But in light of all those challenges, I think it is also important for us to ask ourselves, what are some of the positives that we can take from the 2023 general elections? So in February, for instance, when we had the presidential and the National Assembly elections, one of the things that we noticed was that in spite of the challenges with using the bimodal voter accreditation system and the INEC results viewing portal, BVAS and IREV, we still saw where votes truly reflected the will of the people. So take, for instance, where we had about 8 or 9 outgoing governors who wanted to go to the Senate, for instance. But I think only just about 2 of them won their elections, and one was just in the recent supplementary election that was held. What that tells us that despite the challenges that we're making, we can also see that there are some elements of progress. Some elements where the use of technology, for instance, is able to protect and legitimize the elections that we have. Something else that we saw in the elections that held on March 18th, where we had governorship elections in 28 states and across various state House of Assembly seats. In Zamfara State, for instance, an incumbent governor lost his election, his re-election bid. I think that what that tells us, again, is that truly it's becoming more difficult to manipulate the process, and that the votes of the citizens will truly count. Technology goes a long way in improving electoral processes and electoral outcomes. So in spite of the challenges that we've witnessed with the elections, there are some elements of hope, some elements of progress. A four-year electoral cycle is almost like a blink of an eye, and before you know it, we'll be preparing for another general election. But this 4-year cycle gives us an opportunity to reflect what are the lessons, take some of these recommendations, work towards them. So if that means that civil society organizations need to do advocacy of some reforms to ensure that these recommendations are taken on board to improve our electoral process, that needs to be done as well. And like I said in my previous contribution, is that we have elections coming up in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, in Senegal, later on in end of next year in Ghana as well. So these are opportunities for us to learn and export the lessons that we can from one country to another.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim Farouk.
All right.
So can we have Mr. Samna Sambu and then hello? Mr. Samna Sambu.
Hello, yes. Yes, just to add quickly that the point you raised about technology helping to improve the election is actually true. I mean, we've seen that as journalists ourselves, that there are 2 major factors that play the critical role in how the elections went. First is the introduction of technology, and then secondly, the issues of the cash crunch, actually. You will see that from the first election that we had, the presidential and national assembly elections, there was a lot of scarcity of cash, and that stopped some of these political players from really circumventing the process. But you will now discover that from the second election that we held, things were loosening up a little bit because of the Supreme Court judgment, and then of course cash played a huge influence, and then these political players started messing around with some of the elections. And so as we go into future elections, and then there's some countries within the West African sub-region hold elections, it's one critical thing that's necessary to learn from our own experience is that politicians always want to circumvent the process at all times, and then they use the powers of incumbency to hit the system. But if technology is well introduced, it will help to cut some of the excesses of some of these people. And then also, the power of the media remains very strong. We have a
diversity of media in Nigeria. And then if you look at the media ecosystem, you find out that we have more of private radio and TV stations, and then of course newspapers here and there. So there's that force for good by the media to ensure that the political process is not one that's corrupted by the elite, and then of course we ensure that our country continues to go on with this democracy. Because let's say the politicians will keep fighting themselves until the democracy crumbles. We would have had issues of interim national government being proposed here and there and all of that, but the media has insisted that nothing like that, such conversations should not be given prominence. So when politicians lose out, the next thing they start talking about is how democracy is not working. And meanwhile, they're the ones who are contributing to the challenges of democracy. So what other countries can learn from us is to ensure that the media remains vibrant and that those who are appointed into the electoral authority are those who have very sound mind, because our next form of reforms will definitely have to focus on how to ensure that our electoral system is not populated by those who can easily circumvent the
system. Great submission there, Mr. Kamna Sambo. Dr. Principal, it's your turn now for your concluding remarks. Is Doc still with us, please? Dr. Christopher.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Jonah, and all the friends and members of WADEMOS. Congratulations for a job well done. You've raised the bar on yourselves, because given the importance of Nigeria, the significance of those elections, I think there's now an expectation on the part of all of us that WADEMOS will be out there in the trenches in all of the other countries in the sub-region of West Africa. As we all know, elections are part of the process. They're not the entire, elections do not a democracy make, even when there are excellent or good elections. And unfortunately, we're now in a context where the trends of democratic backsliding are undermining some of the progress that had been made in recent time. And so even in the case of Nigeria, while we celebrated the fact that for 23 years running, Nigerian democracy had not been interrupted by the military, as was the case in the past, or that this was the 6th or 7th election since the transition, we still need to recognize that concrete steps need to be taken to improve on the electoral process and to give Nigerians a sense that their votes actually count, and that their voices are being heard. So your work is really cut out for you. And I think it's incumbent on WADEMOS to, to engage, not just in the countries that have already been mentioned, but also in other countries that are going through transitions. As we know, there's supposed to be transition elections in Mali and Guinea and Burkina Faso. The timeline is obviously not being adhered to by all of the actors. But my sense is that as WADEMOS begins to make its presence felt through excellent, credible actions and reports like the ones we've just discussed, that your credibility would then be leveraged to be able to draw attention and shed the spotlight on those transition environments as well. So thank you very much for a job well done and for giving us this opportunity to share in the release of your findings. I hope that your members across the sub-region will now engage in pushing out your report so that other Africans across the continent can benefit from your good work as well. So thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Christopher, for the kind words. So we'll end the presentation with 4 or 7 before. Okay, thank you very much, Jonah.
I want to the video. Okay, so thank you, Jonah. I can't imagine that 2 hours is just gone. It tells you how relevant and topical the issues are. My colleague Damien, thank you for the reminder to expand our analysis on the role of the media in civil society. We've done a bit of that. So before the report is uploaded or published, we will rework or enhance that part of the report to reflect the conversations that we had regarding the media and civil society. On the uptake of the report, I think Dr. Chris mentioned in his concluding remarks that WADEMOS should take it up, and also national partners in your post-election review process. You integrate or you consider some of the proposals and recommendations that WADEMOS has put forward in your engagement with INEX, with security agencies and other relevant stakeholders in Nigeria. It's also important to mention the point about INEC. Before we went into the election, there were trust issues with INEC, but with the deployment of these technological solutions, I think INEC was able to convince a lot of Nigerians. That reflected in the number of people who turned out to collect their PVC. Unfortunately, it didn't manifest or reflect in the outcome of the election with regard to voter turnout. Also, the fallout from the IREF, a lot will have to be done to work to regain and restore trust in IREF. So on this note, I want to extend WADEMOS actual appreciation to all participants who turned up for the day. And also to mention specifically some of our partners in Nigeria, CDD West Africa, YADA, TMG Transition Monitoring Group, and then the Women's Situation Group. These 4 organizations facilitated and coordinated our pre-election missions. In addition to that, they also supported our election day observation and learning, as well as knowledge exchange missions. We will continue to count on our members at the national level at all times to deploy based on our principle of solidarity. Our next step for elections this year is targeted at Sierra Leone. And in due course, WADEMOS will announce our program for the Sierra Leone election. So I want to thank you once again on behalf of the project director and to wish you all a very good evening wherever you find yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again for agreeing to be here with us. Kindly follow us on our social media platforms, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. And then we'll continue the interactions from there. Thank you very much for joining us and have a pleasant day. Thank you.